callbacks and call forwards. Two ridiculously easy techniques that immediately transform my podcast into a binge-worthy podcast experience. And that's when people listen over and over. The algorithms notice that people are binging and listening.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, Podcast Rich host Adam Adams. And did you know that most podcasts never get more than 136 downloads per episode? And if your podcast has been stuck under 500 downloads per episode, even after 2 years, you are officially in the same boat as 90% of podcasters. But you don't want to be with 90% of the podcasters. Today, I'm going to show you how you can do something completely ridiculously simple. That reminds me of Zoolander. Ridiculously good looking. You can do something ridiculously simple that can change your podcast numbers overnight. So if you've ever felt like your podcast has got you stuck, feeling like you're in quicksand, no matter how much content you create, your downloads barely move. If that's you, you're not alone. And today I'm going to show you how to take a couple of overlooked techniques to allow yourself to trigger some algorithms within the podcast playing platform and get better than usual listeners, people who were casually listening to now people who are binge listening to your show. All right. In the last episode, I talked about how we use ChatGPT to support this episode right now. And actually, in the last episode, I did talk about that I was going to share the 7 parts of the framework there, but actually, I didn't do that. So I'm sharing you the 7-part framework right now. The first big thing of a good story, when I say the 7-part framework, this is about utilizing a story for your listener. And the 7 parts to the story is you got to have some type of hook to that story. And then you want to talk about the character that the story is all about. Third, you want to talk about the desire of that character. Fourth, you want to talk about the problem that the character is facing that's making it hard for them to get that desire. Fifth, you want to talk about the struggle that is within him or whatever is happening. You want to talk about the struggle. Then number 6, as we wrap up a story, we talk about the epiphany. And 7, the final result. This is the equilibrium. This is when everything comes together. So I'm going to use that 7-part framework that I got from Sean McCloskey's Leadership Boardroom, Sean McCloskey's speaker training. And I'll share that with you now in order to help you to be able to what? What's in it for you? What are you going to get from this? And that is that you will be able to grow your podcast on autopilot. You're going to be able to get more and more downloads, more and more listeners by using this. So I'm going to talk about the 7 parts of the story that is going to relate to me helping you to be able to use callbacks and call forwards. And with that in mind, the hook, the number 1, the hook is I want to take you back to my old podcast, the show that I had prior to this show. It was a real estate show. And I ended up selling it back. I started selling it in 2019. It officially closed in 2020. But before I sold that podcast, I felt stuck. I was putting out content like every day. I was putting out so much content and I was doing interviews with other people. I was teaching really valuable stuff in the real estate investing. And I maybe got 70, 80 downloads per episode. So I was below average. And you don't want to be below average. You want to be optimized. You want to be at the top. You want to be top 1%. 70 and 80 isn't going to cut it. We need to get you to 300, 400, 500, 1,000, even 13,000. So where was I? I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. Then we talk about the character, number 2. I was just like you. I was a dedicated podcaster. I was wondering why all of my hard work wasn't paying off. I believed that good content would eventually attract listeners, but nobody ever told me that a podcast discovery doesn't work in that way. I remember saying it like this: if I just have a podcast, Apple and Spotify, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? Adam Adams started a podcast. We've got to get him in front of everyone because he's obviously got some good stuff. Why did I think that? Why did I think just by simply having a show that all of the podcast playing platforms were going to get so excited and push me in front of everyone? It's because I was dumb. I believed if you build it, they will come, and that doesn't automatically happen. So that the character in this story is me. I was dedicated. I was trying to get this going, but it didn't end up working. Number 3 is the desire. So this part of the story is I didn't want to just podcast for fun. I wasn't looking for just something to enjoy my time. I wanted a podcast that actually fueled my business. I wanted to attract clients, passive investors, LPs, limited partners. I wanted to be able to have a show that got me results in my business and established me as the go-to authority in my space. But none of that happens when nobody is listening. I want to put crickets on right now. If you just have a few listeners, you're never going to be able to get the result that you want. So my desire was to have a successful podcast. The problem was, number 4, the problem. The problem was very simple. My episodes were invisible to my listener. Each one just stood alone. It was disconnected from others, and there was no reason for a listener to stick around after they heard an episode. Number 5, the struggle. I tried promoting more on social media. I was posting on social media literally up to 12 hours in a day and doing all my other work and with my kids and trying to exercise and stay healthy and making food. I spent so much extra time. I was working like 120 hours a week. And part of this was the 10, 12, 14 hours a day on social media. That was my struggle. I messed with titles. I messed with thumbnails, all of the surface level stuff that you see, but the downloads barely budged. The downloads that barely budged, they barely changed because the core problem was my content strategy. I'm going to share with you some of that. What's the epiphany? That's when I learned about something called callbacks and call forwards. 2 ridiculously easy techniques that immediately transform my podcast into a binge-worthy podcast experience. And that's when people listen over and over and over, and the algorithms notice that people are binging and listening. There's an algorithm. Think about it like this. What's the purpose of most social media platforms? What is the purpose of Apple Podcasts? What do they want to happen? They want the listener's attention. YouTube is trying to command attention. Facebook is trying to command attention. TikTok is, and all of these different platforms that are out there are fighting each other to keep eyeballs and earballs on their platform. So they build in algorithms that take things that people are already doing, listening to. They take algorithms that understand that a certain show or a certain episode or a certain layer of shows ends up getting somebody to listen to more shows because the Apple Podcast or Spotify wants you to stay on Spotify. So they're only going to promote you. They're only going to push you in front of more people if you're able to get binge-worthy content. So if you've got a podcast that's not calling back to old episodes or calling forward to new episodes, then you're less likely to have your listener stick around. And if your listener doesn't stick around and listen to multiple episodes, then the podcast player believes that you're worth nothing. And that's no offense to you, but the podcast player just is like, okay, we don't need to push him or her in front of anyone because they're not going to keep anyone on this platform. They're only going to keep pushing people in front of them that help the listener to stay in one place. So here's the epiphany again. You can learn how do you keep people to listen to multiple episodes so that you can trigger the algorithm. Number 7, the result. I ran a 5-part series on my old podcast way before I sold it. Think of it like this. I went the first 38, 39 episodes, and I barely had like 60, 70, 80 downloads in an episode. Then I learned about callbacks and call forwards. Now, this was years and years ago. This is probably 2017 that I learned about how can I get people to listen to more than one episode so I can trigger these algorithms. And at that time, I decided, hey, my avatar, my listener to my podcast about real estate could really benefit if they started, it was a meetup group. I had a meetup group at the time that was world ranked. So out of 255,000 meetups, my meetup group in Denver was the absolute most, number one, the most well-attended meetup of not just of real estate, but of anything. And so I was an authority in this space. I was able to teach other people how to have a successful group because I had one of the most successful groups in the entire world. Like top 0.1%. Like huge, right? So I thought to myself, if I'm seeing 8,000 faces a year in my meetup group, and the number 2 meetup is only seeing about 1,000, I'm 8 times bigger than the number 2. And so I've got something I can share. So I created a series and I put it on episode 40 and also episode 42, 44, 46, and 48. So that's 5 different episodes: 40, 42, 46, 48, 40, 42, 44, 46, and 48. So all of the even numbers. I did this series and I recorded episode 40 and I called forward to 42, 4, 6, and 8. I did 44 and I called back to the last one. Hey, if you didn't check that out, and also you're going to want to hear these other things. This is important, so write this part down. Pay close attention to this part. I worked hard to keep those episodes concise. So most of the episodes ended up being 5 or 6 minutes, but 1 or 2 of them ended up being 15 to 20. Why does that matter? Because if I made all of those episodes 1 whole hour each, how could I get somebody to listen to all 5 in one sitting? It would not be easy. They would have to sit there for over an hour. Oh, no, sorry, over 5 hours to listen to all of them. But if I was able to get these episodes where they're 5 to 10 minutes, it's a lot easier for somebody to listen to all 5 of them. That allows me to trigger the algorithm. So I ran this 5-part series using callbacks and call forwards. And before this series, I was at 70-ish downloads per episode. And right at the end, once I got to episode 48 or 50, so I mean, it ended at 48, but I can't remember if it was episode 48 or 50. But I got my first 300 downloads per episode. It skyrocketed, tripled immediately. And so I continued to do this. And within a very short amount of time, I was in the 70-ish downloads per episode, then to the 300-ish, and then all the way up to the 13,000. And I'm not saying that wrong. I went from 70-ish downloads per episode to over 13,000 downloads per episode within a couple of months of just changing to adding callbacks and call forwards. No ads, no expensive funnel, just a smarter episode structure. So that's how I did it. And that's how you're going to do it. So what else can I teach you about callbacks and call forwards? I'm going to give you the framework right here. What is a callback, Adam? A callback is when you reference a past episode. Here's an example. If you missed episode 27, we talked about podcast monetization mistakes. Go and check this one out after you listen to this. That's just an example. You don't actually have to go to episode 27. I just made this up on the off the cuff real fast. But as an example, it's like, hey, when you're done listening to this, go back to this one because you're going to get this value. And that gets people excited. And especially if it's on a similar thing. Hey, I'm already talking about monetizing your podcast. If you go back to this other episode, I talked about these other parts of monetizing a podcast. By listening to both of them, you'll have all of the pieces you need. I'll put that in the show notes. So that's an example. Another thing is wondering to yourself, why does this work? Why is this valuable? Well, it makes the listener binge. The more that they binge, the more Spotify and Apple will think this show must be good, and they start to recommend it to others. This turns your old episodes also into assets and not just a graveyard. And if you feel like you've wasted the best content because nobody heard it, callbacks are a good way to instantly fix that. What is a call forward? A call forward is very similar to callback, except I'm talking about a future episode. A call forward is when you mention upcoming episodes to build anticipation. For example, next week, I'm bringing on a guest who landed $30,000 sponsorship for his very first year. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. It's an example of a future episode. Let's just say you're recording episode 100 right now, and episode 101 is going to be this amazing thing. Why does it work? It makes people look forward to what's next. It keeps them subscribed and it keeps them thinking, I'm going to be loyal. And how does this help your perfect avatar? Well, it helps to create consistent listeners instead of just random drive-bys. It's how you train people to become your super fans. So, why it works for real growth? Now, letter A, so it's ABC here. A, it triggers algorithms. More binging, better ranking and recommendations. B, it increases the trust that you have with your listener and with the podcast playing platform. So referencing past or future episodes makes you look like you are organized and intentional. And letter C, it boosts your total lifetime downloads. Every listener that you hook onto that content web, call it, listens to more episodes than they otherwise would. So if you start finding ways of doing more callbacks and call forwards, or a series like I did with Meetup, episode 40, 42, 44, 46, 48, calling back, calling forward, and keeping them short, you're more likely to trigger those algorithms. Here's some pro tips, real examples and tactics. Always say the exact episode number when you do a callback. What does that take? A little bit of effort, a little bit of time, a little bit of attention. It takes you an extra 10 seconds before you push record. So pro tip number 1, just make sure you're saying the actual episode number. Look it up. Take the time. Second is you always put the link into your show notes. So you just let the listener know, hey, that link is down in the show notes. Scroll down and click. Makes it easier for them. It makes it more likely that they're actually going to do it. You don't want to make your listener have to just scroll through hundreds or thousands of episodes in order to just find one, which makes another thing that is very important. You need the episode numbers as part of the episode title. The episode number should be part of the episode title. That way, the listener can actually find it. But add on top of that, making sure that you have the actual link in the show notes makes it far easier for them to get to it. Next is you want to combine, if possible, another super tactic is combine, or in the same episode, have a callback and a call forward whenever possible, if you're able to do that. Use phrases like this. If you loved this, you'll want to go back to this. Or next week, if you loved this, next week, we're going to go a deep dive into this. So you might want to plan, a mini series, 3 to 5 episodes, and keep most of the episodes as short and concise as you can. Next is, what is the benefit to the avatar here? This works even if you have zero marketing budget. That's a benefit. It's just pure content strategy. And it puts you ahead of 90% of other podcasters who are treating their show like a pile of isolated episodes. It's not like that. You want your person to listen to multiple episodes at the same time. So going back to my real life proof, something that I actually did get benefit from. Remember, in my real estate podcast that I sold several years back, I used this strategy for the first time using a 5-part meetup series, episodes 40, 42, 44, 46, and 48. I linked them all together. And by the end of the series, I had tripled my downloads to over 100. And a couple of months later, I crossed 13,000 downloads per episode. I was no longer stuck. I was able to show my listener and the podcast playing platform that everything that I was doing was intentional by design. So a quick recap, callbacks make your listener binge your past content. Calling forward helps them get excited about what's next. Together, those two things turn your podcast into a binge-worthy, algorithm-friendly machine. If you've been podcasting for a year or two and you're stuck under 500 downloads per episode, this is exactly the kind of strategy we build for our clients at Grow Your Show. We don't just edit, we help you design your content so that it actually grows your podcast listener base. You can head to growyourshow.com. The link is in the show notes, and you can book a free consultation directly with me, and I can show you how we can help you get to the next level. And hey, if this episode gave you a helpful idea, then just do a favor, share it with a podcaster friend that needs to hear this. Make sure that you help them so that they don't quit their podcast because they're not getting results. You can support these guys. You can support your friend. Share this episode with the right person, and I will see you on the next episode.
This is serious. Don't go. Now that you've gotten whatever value that you feel that you got, the actionable takeaways, you need to implement the stuff that you learn. If you remember me talking about bird church once, and they learn how to fly, and then they walk home, I don't want you to walk home. I want you to fly home. So take the steps, take the actionable steps for your benefit so that you can become a better podcaster. That's the only thing that I ask of you. And I'll see you for more actionable tips on the very next episode.